Hello, everybody, and welcome to A Sustainable Approach to Self-Care at Camp. By the time you leave this presentation, my hope is that you'll already have laid the groundwork for a healthy season of camp, and that you'll have a couple really concrete tools to take in with you that don't take a lot of time or energy, but they're tools that you can use in the moment to take care of yourself and to help take care of your teammates as well. So this presentation is a little bit different than most of the ones in this series in that I'll be asking you to pause the presentation throughout to give you time to either reflect, complete an activity, or to work in a group. So whether you're looking at this by yourself or you're in a large group, I would just encourage you to be ready to pause, have something to write with. Even a phone is fine if that's your preferred method, but just something to get your thoughts down. Be ready to have a conversation. And if you are with a group, I encourage you to be organized in a way where you can talk to the teammates that you'll be working closely with this summer. So if you're divided up by age groups or however that looks for your summer camp, to be close by those people who you're going to be working with so that you can have some of these conversations with them. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started here. So I am Rachel Sharon. I'm a health educator with Marshfield Clinic and Wisconsin After School Network. I'm also a social worker by training, and I'm also a professional coach and a yoga teacher. And I share that with all of you because no matter what role I have found myself in, I often come into these conversations where I'm talking to people about how do you take care of yourself when you're doing a really tough job. And so that's something that's really near and dear to my heart and hopefully can pass some of that wisdom that I've learned from other people onto you today. But also wanted to let you know that my motivation today really truly is to give you some palatable tools that are going to be helpful. I'm all for taking that maintenance, self-care time, exercise, meditation, whatever that looks like for you. But what I want to talk about today is really the tools you can use in the moment to help yourself out, something that you don't have to spend extra time on. And hopefully this will be a really empowering experience for all of you. So here's what we have in store. First, we're going to cover some of the inherent stressors. We have to have that honest conversation when we're talking about self-care in camp because there's no other environment like camp, as you all know. We're also going to talk about our why and then how we can leverage that to help ourselves throughout the season. We're going to go over that real tool that I keep referencing so that you have something in your pocket that you can whip out and use at any point during camp. And then we're going to have some space where you can be transparent with your team and set each other up for success throughout the camp season this year. So first of all, we have to ground ourselves. Let's be real. We know that there is no other work environment like working in the camp environment, the summer camp environment. You all have physical demands out in the elements, doing various activities with kids. You're faced with a big emotional burden of keeping whole groups of people regulated, talking to parents, talking to fellow staff, having those hard conversations, and just maintaining that social stamina. You have to have a certain level of energy to keep kids motivated and keep them interested. And it's getting harder and harder because we live in unprecedented times. We have things that happen that we never thought would happen in camp, like we have to all of a sudden bring everyone indoors because the air quality is so poor. Or all of a sudden 20 of our 21 campers arrive and they're glued to a screen. And these are things that we never had to deal with before. And it's a different culture, a different physical environment. And on top of that, and what this series has been promoting along the way is you guys also just have to keep kids safe. You have to keep them engaged and learning. I get so frustrated every time I hear someone compare an out of school time program or a camp to like babysitting because it couldn't be further from the truth. You were all doing such skilled and intentional work that you're in a really special field. And I use this visual here of like the waves crashing on shore. It's a really beautiful picture in a lot of ways. And this is how summer camp is. A lot of us are outdoors and we're in these bright, beautiful spaces and get to do activities with kids that we wouldn't even otherwise be able to do. But as beautiful as this is, sometimes these exceptional times can feel like those waves just like constantly crashing against us. So everybody needs some reprieve and everybody needs a way to kind of step on dry land and take a break from that constant beating, right? So that's really what we're here to talk about today. We also can't move on until we just acknowledge another branch of this extreme environment that we're operating in is related to kids' mental health. So on the slide, you'll see some statistics, and this is from the most recent 2021 Youth Risk Assessment Survey in Wisconsin, where they survey all of Wisconsin's youth and they compile all of these numbers and they look at things from bullying to if kids wear seat belts to if they're drinking underage, all these things that are related to health and risk related to health. They look at mental health really closely nowadays. And as you can see, there's a lot of kids out there who have seriously considered suicide in the last year, according to this study, this survey. 34% felt sad enough or hopeless, where this is like impacting their daily functioning. Like imagine someone who's not eating the same, not sleeping the same, is really needing potentially higher interventions at that point. And 18% were bullied. As part of my role at Marshfield Clinic, I teach suicide prevention training. And one of the things that we do when we go into middle schools and high schools is we have kids stand up in the room to represent these numbers. And you can imagine if you did this with your group at camp, which I don't recommend you doing unless you're trained in question, persuade, refer, but if you imagine how many kids would remain standing if you let them represent these percentages, it's really quite terrifying. I bring this up not to put a downer on things or to close things off right away in the beginning of our conversation. But first of all, I just want to validate some of the experiences that you're going to have at camp. You're going to run into situations that you never imagined running into. You're going to see kids struggling in ways that you never thought they would, or that in ways that they didn't used to in generations previous to this. And so first, just to know that no, you are not crazy when you experience these things. And if you do see something concerning, that is your opportunity to reach out for support and that you don't have to handle those things on your own. But I also bring this up here in our self-care presentation because I want to convince you, if you're not convinced yet, how important it really is to make sure that you have some tools, some go-to options in place to help take care of yourself, because things will be tough. And we want to make sure that all of you are well. You can't keep kids safe. You can't do all of those tasks that we just talked about unless you're feeling safe in your own body. So with that, we move on to our first activity. And what I want to bring to you all with this slide is a foundation, a jumping board for you for the year. So I want you to take some time and really think about, why are you here? Why are you here at summer camp? We talked about some of the amazing things about camp so far, some of the challenges. It's a role like none other, but why are you here? So there's no wrong answer here too. I really want you to be nice to yourselves and judgment free when you're thinking about these things. Your why might be that you're saving some money for your tuition for next semester, for your rent for next semester. Your why might be that you want to gain some skills because you plan on working with kids in the future. Your why might be that you just wanted to have an adventure. I visited a camp last summer where a big percentage of the camp staff were actually from out of state and they had never been to Wisconsin. They wanted to try it out. They liked kids. So they were here at camp, just having a good time. They saw bald eagles for the first time in their lives, which is really cool. So I want you to take some time and really reflect on why it is that you're here. And then once you narrow that down, I really want you to try and dig deeper into and examine kind of the why behind your what, if that makes sense. Um, so why is it that paying your rent for next semester is really important to you? Maybe that speaks to a value that you have about independence or financial security. Um, why is it that you're going into a field where you're working with kids? Maybe that connection piece really matters. Maybe setting kids up to survive in the next generation is really important to you. What are those values behind what you're doing here? And then from there, really think about what you want to be different at the end of the season. And again, this doesn't have to be like some grandiose thing, but what do you want to see change in yourself? What new skill do you want to learn? How do you want things to look at the end of summer? And this is where I invite you to pause the presentation and take a good 5 minutes to get this down and really think about your why. So now that you've had a chance to really ground yourself, we're going to move here into a space where we look at that concrete tool that I've been advertising to all of you along the way. But as we do that, I wanted you all to see this quote from Krista Tippett. She is a great mind and a great philosopher. And if you haven't heard her speak or read anything that she has out there, she's a really good resource if you ever need some motivation. But she says the only real power that sustains us, we find inside ourselves and in the care and the company of others, which I find really fitting for what you have already been reflecting on and what we're about to talk about. Because we're going to really dive into how you all have so much power, even in those extreme situations that we talked about, and even in situations where we might feel a little stuck, we have a lot of power ourselves to change how we think about things, how we feel about things, and all the while being connected to those campers, to our other teams. So we have this power by ourselves, but we also don't do it in a vacuum. And so it's helpful to see where we can do things on our own, and then when we can bring other people into this conversation for sure. So as we move into this next tool, really take what you thought about in your reflection and use that as a foundation. And think about us really building up the walls from there and putting the roof on our house. Your why is your foundation, and from here we build some more support for you as we go forward. So what can get in the way of our why? You guys are grounded in this, you have an idea of why you're here, but what could potentially throw you off or make you feel stuck or get you frustrated? A lot of times it's our thoughts, it's our feelings, or our behaviors, how we respond to a situation. Now, this comes from a cognitive behavioral therapy theory, and it's been used by mental health providers and social workers and coaches in a number of different ways. And it's a really powerful tool to think about how something happens, there's a catalyst, there's a circumstance, you have a thought, that affects how you feel about something, and then it affects your behavior. And of course, you can see the arrows on this visual and how these things move multiple directions. So you might also have a circumstance, something happens at camp, and you react right away. Well, that might cause a certain feeling and then a certain thought. And so these things they're almost in like a very intricate dance with each other. But the cool thing is breaking it down like this, we can really interrupt what seems like an automatic cycle, because sometimes these things really can feel like they're out of control. But in reality, we can slow down just for a moment and think about what's going on and see if we can't tweak things in our favor. So I wanted to talk here about how this can commonly show up as what Brené Brown calls our inner critic. So you can see from the visual, something stressful has occurred for this woman on the screen. And then all these visuals, all these drawings, like almost these gremlins are talking at her. They're calling her names. You're no good at this. What were you thinking? And so I wanted to share that with all of you because that's where you will potentially see some of this showing up. So if something happens at camp, you might have one of those thoughts. And if it feels like those gremlins on your shoulder, it would be a good sign that this would be a time to use the tool that we're about to go over. This shows up in other ways too, but most commonly as that inner critic. So the inner critic comes from a place that's developed over time. So it's like society's messages that tell us we should be a certain way. It's how we were raised. It's certain experiences we had where maybe we tried something out and it didn't work out. So we close ourselves off or we try to protect ourselves. And so as nasty as these gremlins look on the screen, they really are designed to protect us, which is good to know because we don't also have to then be hard on ourselves if they show up. We can give ourselves grace and empathy just like we would a camper in our program. But we also don't have to give them power. And we can change the dynamic, just like we were talking about in the previous slide. So let's really break this down. How might this show up at camp? Okay, so we have a circumstance, and you can see your teammate leaves the table cleaning for the 5th day in a row. Ugh, no one wants to clean tables for 5 days in a row, right? And then that triggers a thought in you. They don't think my time is as important as theirs. The feeling as a result might be resentment. Doesn't feel too good. You might notice there's like a tightening in your jaw that happens. Your chest is kind of restricting. Your body's telling you like, this isn't a situation that I want to stay this way. And then as a result, you rush through cleaning. You want to get it done. You're just kind of distanced from that person the next day. You don't say hello. You don't check in with them as normal. And the result from that is that there's less communication, there's more frustration overall. And this essentially is like bleeding into other areas of your work and your teamwork together. So I want to pause here before we move on to some more intentional models here and just show you how simple this is. So you have a circumstance, you have a thought about it, a feeling, noticings. It can be feelings in your body. Some people experience colors, noises, things like that come up. Anything that can cue you in to alarm bells or anything that you're feeling. And then ultimately you're having those behaviors like we talked about with the cognitive triangle. And that's going to create results for you. And so you can see how one kind of blends into the other. Very simple. You can write these down on a napkin. If you don't have anything else, you can put them in your phone. You can also do this in your head because it's such a concrete tool and it's so few steps where you can just follow one to the next. So that's just the automatic thing that happened. Again, we have some gremlins. We are conditioned to think this way, but it doesn't leave us in a place where we want to be as a coworker or as a leader of our campers. So how do we maybe start to shift things? First, I would recommend really examining your circumstance on the very top before you get into the thoughts and feelings and noticing, and really think about if it's neutral. Because before, as you can see, we'll back up one more time, your teammate leaves you table cleaning for the 5th day in a row. It's factual. It happened for the 5th time in a row, but there's a little bit of judgment there. So let's see if we can make this a little more neutral to play around with it. You clean the tables after lunch for the week. Okay. Already, doesn't that have a different feel to it? You are cleaning the tables this week. That's all fact. No one could argue with that. They could go in, observe what happened, measure it. It's all factual. So from there, we decide we want to focus on changing the thought to make this intentional. So instead of judging that teammate and saying they don't care about our time, we decide, what if we looked at it differently? And we said, my teammate has their attention on other things this week. That feels a lot different. It doesn't necessarily change the circumstance or make it so that we don't, that all of a sudden we want to clean the tables or that we take that burden on us. It doesn't let things off the hook, but it's a different way of looking at things. What kind of feeling might this result in? I think it leads to more empathy potentially. And in this example, you might notice some softening. There's less of that clenching feeling. And then the actions that this thought leads you to take is that you check in and you ask how they're doing. And you ask leadership for help if you need an extra hand. And so your result is more teaming and more connection. And at the end of the day, you're not left with table cleaning more than the other person, but you helped solve a problem. So it's a really different feeling just by changing your thought. So let's do another example. Same circumstance. You clean the tables after lunch for the week, but you don't feel like approaching that thought as much, and you want to start with the results. What kind of results would you like to get? I'd like to clean the tables every other day because that's what's fair. That's reasonable. So starting from there and going up the model, what would that potentially look like? Maybe this causes you to touch base after campers leave to see if you can trade off days. Just asking a neutral question. Hey, wondering if we could switch off for table cleaning. You notice kind of a warmth, a grounding. You feel confident. And at the end of the day, you have the thought that I can get help while still demonstrating that I'm willing to team. So here you're in a situation where you've advocated for yourself and you've also demonstrated a willingness to support others. So again, another intentional model that feels really different. And you can see where someone driving home at the end of the day using that initial reactive model, that drive home is going to go a lot different. You're going to be thinking about a lot different things than one of these more intentional models. And again, this is a tool that you can run through without anyone even knowing you're doing it. It can happen in a matter of a moment or two. It is always helpful when you can write these things down and see them in black and white, but you don't even have to have a pen with you to do this tool and to help change the circumstance. So now you try. This is not as fun of a visual here. So the scenario is that a parent yells at you that their kid is being bullied, that's your fault, and you're not doing anything about it. They're loud, they're scary. I want you to think about what is your initial reaction. Where do you go first? Do you go to thoughts first? Do you go to your body first? Do you feel stress first? Is this a place where you feel really confident? Think about the model and really try to work through this scenario here. And here I have posted the model in black and white so you can think about the circumstance. How would you phrase that neutrally, all facts? And then again, going through in whatever order comes to you, what kind of thoughts come to mind, feelings, noticing, actions, and results. So here again, I'm going to ask you to pause the presentation and take 3 to 5 minutes to fill this out and even check in with your coworkers about what you noticed. All right, so now that you had a chance to go through what it's like to experience those reactions and think about an intentional model that you could maybe set yourself up to be feeling different in a really stressful situation. I also want to take some time to reflect. So what was that like for you? Did you kind of feel like there was writer's block? Did things come really easy? What was your go-to? Did the thoughts surface first? What came up for you? And then think about how you might use this tool in camp. So either for yourself in the moment, at the end of the day to debrief a situation, maybe you use it with your teammates now that you all have access to this tool. But then also think about how you might use this to run through a scenario with a camper. You don't necessarily have to tell them that you're using cognitive behavioral therapy concepts and that that you're going through an intentional model with them, but you can ask them really powerful questions. about what they're feeling in their body, about what are they thinking, and then trying to offer that alternate explanation. And this fits really nicely with the behavior guidance filter that we have available to you in some of our other presentations in this series, and thinking about how this might fit in to help process a really tough situation. So from here, we're going to watch a short video, and hopefully technology will work in my favor.
Ish by Peter H. Reynolds. Ish. Ramon loved to draw. Anytime, anything, anywhere. One day, Ramon was drawing a vase of flowers. His brother, Leon, leaned over his shoulder. Leon burst out laughing. "What is that?" he asked. Ramon could not even answer. He just crumpled up the drawing and threw it across the room. Leon's laughter haunted Ramon. He kept trying to make his drawings look right, but they never did. After many months and many crumpled sheets of paper, Ramon put his pencil down. "I'm done." Marisol, his sister, was watching him. "What do you want?" he snapped. "I was watching you draw," she said. Ramon sneered. "I'm not drawing. Go away." Marisol ran away, but not before picking up a crumpled sheet of paper. "Hey, come back here with that." Ramon raced after Marisol, up the hall and into her room. He was about to yell, but fell silent when he saw his sister's walls. He stared at the crumpled gallery. "This is one of my favorites," Marisol said, pointing. "That was supposed to be a vase of flowers," Ramon said, "but it doesn't look like one." "Well, it looks vase-ish," she exclaimed. "Vase-ish?" Ramon looked closer. Then he studied all the drawings on Marisol's walls and began to see them in a whole new way. "They do look ish," he said. Ramon felt light and energized. Thinking ishly allowed his ideas to flow freely. He began to draw what he felt, loose lines quickly springing out, without worry. Ramon once again drew and drew the world around him. Making an ish drawing felt wonderful. He filled his journals. Tree-ish, house-ish, boat-ish, afternoon-ish, fish-ish, sun-ish. Ramon realized he could draw his ish fillings too. Peace-ish, silly-ish, excited-ish. His ish art inspired ish writing. He wasn't sure if he was writing poems, but he knew they were poem-ish. Ponder, pond, ponder, dream, wander. Pond, pond, yond, yond, gleam, wander, Ramon. One spring morning, Ramon had a wonderful feeling. It was a feeling that even ish words and ish drawings could not capture. He decided not to capture it. Instead, he simply savored it. And Ramon lived ishfully ever after. The end-ish.
I hope you all enjoyed that little short video there. I think it's such a good spin-off of everything that we've been talking about today. The brother in the beginning of the story really demonstrating what it feels like to have those gremlins coming in. But then really that idea of like that flexibility in thinking and be able to respond differently in an ish way, so that we can be more intentional about our reactions that we're having as we do experience the inherent stressors of camp. And I also love what the sister represents there, when she starts to help him reframe the situation, because that's how we're going to end today, is talking to one another and how we're going to help each other by having honest conversations now so that you all know how one another operates when you get into tough moments. And then hopefully you expand that conversation to talk even more about how you can support each other. I encourage you to build off of the questions that I'm about to put on the screen and really talk about what do things look like for you personally when you are stressed out? Do you go straight to thinking negative things? Do you have certain behaviors that would clue your teammates in that maybe you need a break? Or what would you like them to do to support you if you're stressed out? So really encouraging you to take this conversation further and think about how you all want to operate as a team as you go throughout the summer.
Ish by Peter.
And so that brings us to, like I said, our last activity. So here again, I'll ask you to pause the slides and use these questions to talk about your preferences, talk about your leadership style. Do you like to kind of be behind the scenes? Do you like to be leading the pack? Is it a balancing act for you, or you like a little of both? Think about that and what that looks like for you and how that might work with the other people on your team. How do you want campers to see you? Do you want them to see you as the authoritative person, that's where you help kind of draw the line and keep kids safe? Do you like to be seen as the fun person? Can you be flexible in either of those things so that you can help meet all of the needs? Policies and procedures. Definitely take the time you need to pause and look through any policies that would be relevant here. Do you guys think rules are up for interpretation? Sometimes they are. Sometimes our policies are working documents that can be changed and you can give input. Some are not by any means up for interpretation. So what does that look like for you, and how do you check your thinking on those things? And what are the most important rules? And then work ethic. What are your thoughts on schedule? Are you the person that's 15 minutes early or 15 minutes late? And then what does that look like for your team either way? And how do you like to get help? What does help look like for all of you? So really take the time with this. And again, my biggest hope for you is that you carry this conversation into that self-care piece. Before you pause, I wanted to mention that these questions are very loosely taken, inspired by Kim Ahek, who is a wonderful leader in the camp world. She runs Camp to Campus Learning Solutions, and I would encourage all camps to look up some of her resources because she has a whole curriculum where she helps programs go through conversations much more in depth than this. So if this is an area that you all really want to dive into, she would be a really good resource. And also Kelly Coulthard from Spark to Ember Consulting. She's a consultant that works with Wisconsin After School Network, and she also has an expertise in this area. So she would be a good resource for everyone as you continue to dive into this throughout the summer. So with that, I will let you pause the slides and move into this activity. And now that you're all back, I just wanted to end with a quick thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here for our kids in Wisconsin. Not everyone can do the work that you all do, and I say that from a very genuine place and seeing you all in action out there during the summertime. And so thank you. I have a lot of gratitude for all that you're doing for Wisconsin. And if this was helpful for you, if you need any additional resources on self-care, please contact Wisconsin After School Network. We have an updated website and our email is on the screen. So don't ever hesitate to reach out if you want more information on this topic. Thank you, everybody.